What's up, sons? It's Blind Run with Son of a Tech once again, and I have our review for the EVGA GTX 1070 Superclocked Edition with the ACX Cooler 3.0. It's the new cooling solution from EVGA, and we're going to check it out right now. The EVGA 1070 Superclocked ACX 3.0 GPU features the new ACX cooler from EVGA, which moves away from the black finish to a silver and white look. Along with the color change, the cooler shroud looks and feels more premium than previous solutions from EVGA. Underneath the shroud is an underwhelming heatsink with no visible copper tubing, so nothing flashy here. Along with the fancy shroud, EVGA includes a brushed aluminum backplate and white LEDs that grace not only the front of the card but the top of the card, so you can see that annoying white LED from any point of view. Sorry guys, no RGB here. The things that matter visually are the 3 display ports, single HDMI and a single dual-link DVI. Keep in mind that there are no analog outputs because there's no DVI-I, so VGA ports on your monitor will be unusable. Next we have the 8-pin power adapter sporting a 4+1 power phase, which is no upgrade from the Founders Edition. However, there is an additional 20 watts of power draw, bringing the advertised draw up to 170 watts from 150 watts on the Founders Edition. Under the hood, the card sports a 1784 MHz boost clock out of the box, which is a whopping 100 MHz over the Founders Edition. Boost clock communicates over a 256-bit bus with 8 GB of GDDR5 clocked at 8000 MHz effectively. While the tech channels receive samples that overclocked an additional 125 MHz above the shipped boost clock, the retail card hit a core clock of an additional 90 MHz. Whether that's Silicon Lottery or for shame on Nvidia, it doesn't appear to affect the performance in any noticeable fashion. As this is the first formal GPU review for Son of a Tech, graphs must start somewhere, and these are the benchmarks for the EVGA GTX 1070 Superclocked Edition. Starting from lowest frame rate first, 3D Mark Time Spy Graphics Test 2. The second test in all of the 3D Mark applications seems to be the more demanding one, and that is no different this time around with their new DirectX 12 specialized benchmarking tool, Time Spy. In this test, we received a 34.19 frame rates per second. In the graphics test 1 from the same test or benchmark from 3D Mark, we received a grand total of 39.32 frames per second. Now we get to start talking about some video games. First one on the list is actually a Universal Windows platform game that's also on DirectX 12. For this test, we added in the 4K textures and maxed out the settings, which brought our card into the low frame rates of below 60 at 59.1 frames per second. To test this, we used an application called Present Mon from GitHub, and you guys can check that out in the description below if you're curious how we did that. Now, moving on to Grand Theft Auto 5, which is a DirectX 11 game. We put it to high settings, cranked it as high as we could, and we hit a grand total of 76.6 frames per second on average, which is pretty damn good. And I think that if you are a Grand Theft Auto 5 fan, you might want to check out this card. Next, we have the 3D Mark Firestrike Graphics Test 2. This came in at a whopping 77.73 frames per second. Next game on the list is Far Cry Primal. We also have some Ultra HD texture packages available to load in for this game, and we ran the canned benchmark with settings turned to max. Now keep in mind, I don't think these are actually 4K textures. I think these are more like 1440p textures, but I'm not too sure. Let me know what you guys have found out by your research in the comment section below. Anyways, that aside, the EVGA GTX 1070 Superclocked performed admirably with an 89 frames per second. In The Witcher 3, we were able to pull off 92.8 frames per second on ultra settings with no hairworks. We're going to be running no hairworks so that we can compare these results later to any AMD cards. The next game is, or application is, another one from 3D Mark, and it is Firestrike 1.1 with Graphics Test 1, which averaged a frame rate of 92.85. Last, but certainly not least, is a game that scales very well and also has a brand new API, and that is Doom. We ran this in with the Vulkan API as opposed to OpenGL, and even though we don't have any supported drivers quite yet from NVIDIA, we were able to see better results than in OpenGL, and we hit an enormous 169.49 FPS. Bravo to the guys over there, to the developers over there, and thanks for making a good game that scales well and actually plays smooth at any refresh rate. In conclusion, while the EVGA Superclocked Edition has proven to outpace reference designs in the past, that simply isn't the case with the 1070 Superclocked Edition. Unfortunately, from all the benchmarks that I could compare online, seeing as I haven't run the Founders Edition personally, it still looks like we're only getting a couple frames per second more than the Founders Edition, aka the reference design from NVIDIA. That being said, the thermals look much better than the recorded thermals I've seen from the Founders Edition, and that could be saying a lot if you're talking about longevity with the card. Except these days, for the most part, technology moves so fast, the car's probably not going to die before you pick up a new one. In my personal test, just to give you guys an idea, I only reached about 65 degrees Celsius, and that was maxing the card out at 100% in synthetic benchmarks. In your daily gaming experience, you're going to see never cracking 60 degrees Celsius from what I can tell, unless you have a really hot room. In a 2-hour session in The Witcher 3, I was about 58 degrees Celsius, and I played for a 2-hour period. Hope you guys enjoyed this review of the EVGA Superclocked edition of the 1070 with the ACX 3.0 cooler. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know if this is a card you are looking at picking up. And until next time, I'll see you next Tuesday.